Back in 1975, Good Times turned the struggles of one Chicago family into laughter that echoed across America. Decades later, the real drama began. Careers collapsed, tragedies struck, and the bright promise of stardom dimmed for many of its beloved cast. Stay with us as we look back on their journeys and celebrate the unforgettable joy they once brought into our homes. Bern Nadette Stannis as Thelma Evans. Thelma Evans wasn't just the pretty daughter of the Evans family, she was its heartbeat of hope. She has everything: sharp tongue, dazzling beauty, and unshakable determination to climb out of poverty through education. At only 21 years old in 1975, Bern Nadette Stannis gave America a young black woman it had rarely seen on primetime TV. But success came with a curse. Hollywood loved Thelma so much, it refused to see the actress behind her. Casting directors reduced Stannis to the beautiful black girl, ignoring the intelligence and depth she had shown on Good Times. While her co-stars moved on to projects like Roots or national stand-up fame, Bern Nadette found herself auditioning for roles that were shallow, stereotypical, or humiliating. She had talent, but the industry had already locked her into a box. The rejection hit hard. When Good Times ended, Stannis slipped into depression, haunted by the silence of a phone that rarely rang. She confessed in interviews that she struggled to imagine a future in an industry that saw her only as Thelma. The glamour of her character clashed with the reality of her career. Hollywood doors slammed shut, and scripts offered to her were insulting compared to the dignity she had once represented. And yet, she refused to vanish. Reinventing herself, Stannis turned to writing, pouring heartbreak into books about love, relationships, and resilience. Fans, still loyal after decades, embraced her words. She found a second life in nostalgia tours, on TV One specials, and at conventions where people still called her Thelma. The name that once trapped her became, ironically, her salvation. Now, at 72 years old, Bern Nadette Stannis has built an estimated net worth of $6 million, not from blockbuster films or Hollywood glory, but from the strength to survive an industry that tried to forget her. To fans, she remains the eternal Thelma, beautiful, ambitious, and proof that even when dreams collapse, resilience can rebuild them into something lasting. Esther Rolle as Florida Evans. Florida Evans was not just the Evans family's mother. She was their backbone. Calm but firm, gentle yet unbreakable, she carried every hardship with grace. Viewers remembered her for the way she stood at the kitchen table, arms crossed, voice steady, always finding the strength to hold her family together in a world that seemed determined to tear them apart. Esther Rolle was 54 in 1975 when she stepped into Florida's shoes, and she made television history. She gave audiences a mother who was not a stereotype, but a mirror of real life. But the role that made her famous also became the battleground of her career. Rolle despised how Good Times leaned into slapstick, especially the caricatured direction of JJ's character. To her, it betrayed everything the show was supposed to stand for. Her protest was not quiet. She walked away at the height of the series, knowing it could cost her everything. Leaving a hit sitcom was a dangerous gamble. Hollywood was not offering serious roles for women like her, and when she did find work, whether in Summer of My German Soldier or later in Rosewood, it was never consistent. Each role felt like a fight, a reminder that an actress of her caliber had to claw for opportunities that others were simply handed. When Esther Rolle died in 1998 at 78, her net worth was estimated at $3 million. Not enormous by Hollywood standards, but every dollar was earned the hard way. To fans, her true fortune was the power of Florida Evans, a role born out of courage and a performance that still commands respect decades later. Jimmy Walker as James J.J. Evans, Jr. J.J. Evans was chaos wrapped in neon clothes. Loud, hilarious, and unpredictable, he danced across the screen like a living firecracker. His catchphrase, "Dynamite," became a national obsession, and in 1975, at just 27 years old, Jimmy Walker turned himself into the heartbeat of Good Times. To fans, he was joy itself, the reason they tuned in week after week. Walker's stand-up roots prepared him for stardom. Before Good Times, he was hustling in New York comedy clubs, sharpening his wit until he landed his big break. His rise was meteoric. Guest spots on The Tonight Show and magazine covers made him one of the most recognizable faces of the decade. But comedy's crown came with thorns. Hollywood locked him into the role of the clown, the buffoon. Films like Airplane and TV guest spots only reinforced the stereotype. Worse, his own co-stars resented his growing spotlight. Esther Rolle and John Amos felt his character was damaging to the image of Black America, and Walker became a pariah on his own set, loved by millions, but judged by those closest to him. After Good Times, roles dried up. He returned to stand-up, grinding through small venues while other comedians of his era soared ahead. Though he remained visible, his career never escaped the shadow of J.J. Evans. He was trapped in a role he could never outrun, no matter how hard he tried. Now, at 78 years old, Jimmy Walker is still working stages, and still carrying the catchphrase that both made and confined him. His estimated net worth is around $800,000, a sobering reminder of how a cultural icon can fade into financial struggle when Hollywood refuses to let them evolve. Janette Dubois as Willona Woods. Willona Woods was sparkle personified. The stylish neighbor with quick wit and sass, she brought glamour and sharp humor to the Evans Chicago projects. At 29 years old in 1975, Janette Dubois made Willona unforgettable. She was the confidant, the comic relief, and sometimes the truth-teller the family didn't want but needed. Dubois's artistry stretched far beyond acting. She gave the world one of TV's greatest theme songs, "Movin' On Up from the Jeffersons," her voice becoming the soundtrack to an entire era of black television. She won Emmys for voice work on Eddie Murphy's animated series The PJs, and appeared in cult favorites like I'm Gonna Get You Sucka. She was multi-talented, versatile, and bursting with creativity, yet her career was laced with frustration. After Good Times, Hollywood rarely offered her roles that matched her talent. She was often pigeonholed as the sassy sidekick, forced to recycle the very traits that once made Willona beloved. She built her own performing arts academy to nurture young talent, but financial troubles forced its closure. For Dubois, the industry's neglect weighed heavily, and every triumph came paired with a setback. Her greatest heartbreak came in the form of invisibility. Despite her contributions to television history, she was too often overlooked, relegated to footnotes while less talented peers thrived. The weight of being forgotten gnawed at her career, leaving her legacy underappreciated until late in life. When Janette Dubois died in 2020 at the age of 74, she left behind an estate worth about $2 million. To fans, she was priceless, but to Hollywood, she was another cautionary tale of brilliance undervalued. Her voice still sings on in reruns, carrying the bittersweet echo of what could have been. Janet Jackson as Penny Woods. When Penny Woods appeared in Season 5 of Good Times, viewers instantly took her into their hearts. Played by 11-year-old Janet Jackson in 1977, Penny was the adopted daughter of Willona Woods. Her storyline was heavy, an abused child finding safety in Willona's home, and Jackson delivered a performance far beyond her years. Her vulnerability made audiences cry, and her resilience made them cheer. But Penny was just the beginning. Janet Jackson would become one of the biggest stars in music history, selling over 100 million records worldwide. Her albums Control, 1986, Rhythm Nation 1814, 1989, and The Velvet Rope, 1997, defined pop and R&B for an entire generation. She also appeared in films like Poetic Justice and Why Did I Get Married, proving her talent extended beyond the stage. Still, Her career was scarred by devastating setbacks. In 2004, the infamous Super Bowl halftime show with Justin Timberlake led to one of the harshest public backlashes in modern music. Endorsement deals vanished, her songs were blacklisted, and her career momentum stalled overnight. For years, she was unfairly blamed for an incident she did not orchestrate. Her personal life carried its own weight: 3 divorces, controlling relationships, and lifelong battles with insecurity about her appearance. The pressures of fame pushed her toward repeated plastic surgeries, which in turn caused health scares. Behind the glamour of the stage was a woman often at war with herself and the image the world forced upon her. Today, Janet Jackson is 59 years old with an estimated net worth of $180 million. Despite her scars, she remains a music icon, a survivor whose pain and triumphs are etched into every note she sings. John Amos, as James Evans Sr. James Evans Sr. was the strength of good times. Tough but loving, he embodied the working-class father who would sacrifice everything to protect his family. At 35 years old in 1975, John Amos brought James to life with booming authority and raw emotion. His presence anchored the series. When he walked into a room, every word carried weight. But behind the scenes, Amos was as fiery as his character. He refused to accept scripts that played into stereotypes, clashing repeatedly with producers over what he believed were racist undertones. By 1976, the battles came to a head. Amos was fired from the series, cutting short a role that had the potential to define his career. The fallout was devastating. Losing a hit sitcom meant stepping into Hollywood with a reputation for being difficult. Though Amos went on to powerful performances in Roots, Coming to America, and numerous TV dramas, the stain of his exit followed him. Roles came, but never with the same stability or prominence he deserved. In later years, personal turmoil added to the professional strain. Family disputes spilled into the public eye, including legal battles involving his children. Financial instability forced him to keep working well into his 70s, even as his health declined. For a man who once stood as television's most respected father figure, the reality was far more fragile. When John Amos died in 2024 at the age of 84, his net worth was estimated at just $300,000. It was a shocking contrast to his decades-long career, proof that even the strongest of screen fathers could not escape the cruelty of an unforgiving industry. Johnny Brown as Nathan Bookman. Nathan Bookman, the superintendent of the Evans Housing Project, was often the butt of the joke on Good Times. Nicknamed Buffalo Butt, he was ridiculed by the kids but secretly loved by the audience. Johnny Brown, who was 38 in 1975, played him with such charm that even when Bookman was the target of teasing, his good nature and quick comebacks made him unforgettable. Before Good Times, Brown had been a fixture on television variety shows. He was a regular on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, and his singing and comedic timing earned him respect in both stand-up and musical circles. His appearances on The Flip Wilson Show and The Jeffersons proved his versatility, and by the mid-1970s, his role on Good Times cemented him as a familiar face in American households. Yet his career was marked by painful what-ifs. Brown was originally considered for the role of Lamont in Sanford and Son, but a scheduling conflict forced him to step aside. The part went to Demond Wilson, and Brown would later admit the missed opportunity haunted him for years. He often wondered how different his career might have been had he been cast in that groundbreaking role. As the years passed, Brown leaned on guest roles and commercials, but he never escaped the shadow of Bookman. While he enjoyed steady work, he struggled to find leading parts. The industry's typecasting and his own health issues limited his chances, leaving him underappreciated despite his undeniable talent. Johnny Brown died in 2022 at the age of 84, passing suddenly after a pacemaker check. His net worth at death was estimated at $2 million, built from commercials, guest appearances, and his time on Good Times. Fans remember him as the man who could make humiliation funny and turn insult into laughter. Ralph Carter as Michael Evans. Michael Evans was the militant midget, the youngest Evans child whose fiery speeches often outshone the adults. At only 13 years old in 1975, Ralph Carter gave the world a boy, wise beyond his years, unafraid to call out injustice. Fans adored him for his energy, his sharpness, and his role as the conscience of the Evans family. Before Good Times, Carter was already a star on Broadway, winning awards for his performance in Raisin. He even launched a promising music career with the album Young and in Love. For a time, it seemed he would transition seamlessly into stardom across stage, screen, and song. But the reality of growing up in Hollywood was cruel. After Good Times ended, Carter struggled to find adult roles. The industry could not see past the boy activist, and his early momentum faded. His music career stalled, and his Broadway aspirations were overshadowed by the image of Michael Evans. He fell into drinking and depression, battling the pressure of expectations unmet. Rumors about his personal life added to the weight. Speculation about his sexuality made headlines in the 1980s, creating stress in an era far less tolerant than today. Though he built a family life and kept working on stage, the scars of lost opportunities never fully healed. Gambling troubles only deepened his financial struggles, forcing him to rely on smaller gigs and nostalgia appearances. Now, Ralph Carter is 64 years old, with an estimated net worth of $1 million. It is a modest sum compared to the promise of his youth. His story is a poignant reminder of how swiftly the spotlight can dim, leaving behind an artist still trying to reconcile who he was with who he might have been. Ben Powers as Keith Anderson. In the final season of Good Times, audiences watched Thelma finally find love with Keith Anderson, a professional football player whose career was derailed by injury. Ben Powers, at 28 years old in 1978, played Keith with warmth and charm, giving fans a rare, happy ending in a show filled with struggle. His character's perseverance mirrored Powers' own hunger for success. Before Good Times, Powers had worked in stand-up and small television roles. He appeared on Laugh-In and made guest appearances on shows like Gimme a Break and Flamingo Road. His good looks and charisma made him a natural leading man, and for a brief time, Hollywood saw him as a rising star. But behind the camera, his career was unraveling. In the 1980s, Powers struggled with the pressures of Hollywood and fell into cocaine use. The addiction, paired with grueling schedules, wore him down physically and mentally. His involvement in projects that were later canceled, like the Mike Hammer series after Stacy Keach's drug arrest, added to his frustration. Roles stopped coming, and the promise of his early years began to fade. By 1985, Powers quietly stepped away from Hollywood. He lived a private life, rarely giving interviews, but the shadows of addiction and regret lingered. His career, once filled with promise, became a cautionary tale of how quickly opportunity can slip away. Ben Powers died in 2015 at the age of 64 from liver cancer. His net worth was estimated at just $500,000, a modest figure that reflected a life cut short and a career that never reached its full potential. Fans remember him as Keith, the man who gave Thelma Evans the love story she deserved, even as his own story ended in heartbreak. Moses Gunn as Carl Dixon. When Carl Dixon walked into Florida Evans's life in Season 4, he gave audiences something rare on Good Times, a glimpse of new love after tragedy. Carl was kind, stable, and offered Florida the hope of a future beyond grief. Though he appeared in just 9 episodes, his relationship with Florida remains one of the show's most tender arcs. Moses Gunn was 48 in 1977 when he played Carl, but he was already a heavyweight of the stage. An Obie Award winner, he delivered powerhouse performances in The Blacks, Othello, and films like Shaft. His commanding voice and presence made him unforgettable, an actor whose gravitas could fill a stage or screen with ease. But Hollywood never gave Gunn the full recognition he deserved. Discrimination meant he was boxed into tough man or secondary roles, while white counterparts with less talent were handed leads. He endured rejection after rejection, often walking away from auditions knowing the decision had been made before he even opened his mouth. His health battles added another cruel layer. A heavy smoker with chronic asthma, Gunn spent years gasping for breath between performances. The same lungs that projected Shakespeare's words across a theater eventually betrayed him, cutting short a career that should have spanned decades more. Moses Gunn died in 1993 at age 64 from asthma complications. His net worth was estimated at $1 million, a modest figure for a man whose artistry outshone his opportunities. Fans remember him not just as Carl Dixon, Florida's second chance at love, but as an actor whose strength masked the pain of an unjust industry. Teddy Wilson as Sweet Daddy Williams. Sweet Daddy Williams was one of Good Times' most outrageous recurring characters. With flashy suits, oversized hats, and smooth talk dripping with menace and charm, he was the hustler you couldn't help but enjoy watching. Teddy Wilson, only 33 in 1976, made Sweet Daddy a scene stealer, equal parts comedy and danger. Wilson's career was thriving in the 1970s. He showed up everywhere, Sanford and Son, The Jeffersons, What's Happening, always bringing energy and charisma. He had the makings of a breakout star, the kind of actor whose presence elevated every sitcom he touched. But Hollywood had a narrow vision for him. Wilson found himself trapped in typecasting, offered role after role as the slick hustler, the bad guy. The repetition frustrated him deeply. He wanted depth, complexity, but the industry didn't care. The stress of working non-stop without artistic fulfillment took its toll. Alcohol became his quiet escape. Friends later said the long hours, the rejection, and the constant grind pushed him towards self-destruction. By the time a stroke cut his life short, Wilson had spent years carrying the burden of wasted potential. His sudden death at 47 shocked his peers, who knew he had so much more to give. Teddy Wilson died in 1991, leaving behind a wife and children. His net worth was estimated at $500,000. To fans, he'll always be Sweet Daddy, the unforgettable hustler whose swagger brought both laughter and edge to the Evans family's world. Helen Martin as Weeping Wanda. Weeping Wanda wasn't on screen often, but when she appeared, audiences laughed until they cried. She was the neighborhood woman who showed up sobbing at every turn, and Helen Martin played her with such over-the-top brilliance that even her tears became comedy gold. At 65 in 1974, Martin was the veteran actress who made 5 short appearances unforgettable. Martin's career stretched far beyond Good Times. She had more than a dozen Broadway credits before transitioning into television and film, later delighting audiences as Pearl Shea in 227 and popping up in cult comedies like Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood. She was the kind of actress who could wring laughter out of even a single line. But behind the comedy was a life hardened by rejection. Martin came of age in an era when Broadway offered few dignified roles to black women. She spoke openly about the humiliation of being typecast, joking on Conan O'Brien's show that she nearly became a stripper because the industry wasn't hiring her. She leaned on humor, but the truth was painful. She was too often overlooked. Even in her later years, Martin embraced rebellion. She admitted her fondness for marijuana on national TV, laughing that, "I love reefer." Beneath the joke was a woman who had survived decades of Hollywood's hypocrisy and refused to apologize for living on her own terms. But loneliness remained. She had no children, and her last years were marked by solitude. Helen Martin died in 2000 at 90 years old from a heart attack. Her net worth was estimated at $1 million. She may not have had fame equal to her talent, but she will forever be remembered as Weeping Wanda, the neighbor whose cries turned grief into laughter. Shirley Hemphill as Rosie. Rosie was one of Willona's fun-loving friends, a character who breezed into good times for only 3 episodes, but left her mark with sass and quick wit. Shirley Hemphill, then just 29 in 1976, played Rosie with the same bold energy that would later define her career. She was loud, funny, and unafraid to take up space, the kind of presence that could steal a scene in seconds. That same energy soon launched Hemphill into stardom. She became the breakout star of What's Happening, where she played Shirley Wilson, the sharp-tongued waitress beloved by audiences. Her comedic timing was flawless, and for a while it seemed she had carved a permanent place in television. But Hollywood is unforgiving. Creative disputes on What's Happening led to her dismissal, and the loss haunted her career. The sitcom spotlight dimmed, and though she continued doing stand-up and minor guest appearances, she never regained the momentum. The rejection, paired with her struggles with obesity and diabetes, weighed heavily on her spirit. Her death in 1999 was especially tragic. Found alone in her home at 52, she had quietly battled health problems and isolation. At the time of her passing, Shirley Hemphill's net worth was estimated at just $200,000, a small sum for a woman who once had millions laughing with her. She remains remembered as Rosie and Shirley, bold, brash, and gone far too soon. Hal Williams as Willie Washington. Willie Washington was James Evans's friend, a neighborhood man whose warmth and humor added texture to the Evans world. Hal Williams, 37 in 1975, played him with authenticity. Every line felt like it came from someone who knew life's struggles firsthand. Williams built a steady career beyond Good Times. He was a familiar face in 227, where he played Lester Jenkins, the husband of Marla Gibbs's character. He also appeared in films like Private Benjamin, 1980, and had guest spots on nearly every major sitcom of the 1970s and 80s. His deep voice and dignified bearing made him memorable even in supporting roles, yet his career never reached the heights it might have. Typecasting limited his options, and once 227 ended, Hollywood seemed to lose interest in older black actors. The struggle for meaningful work grew more difficult with age, and Williams had to settle for smaller guest appearances rather than the starring roles his experience merited. Alcohol abuse in earlier years only compounded his health issues, though he eventually overcame those battles with the help of family. Still, the toll it took meant his later life was quieter, with fewer opportunities and a modest public profile. Now, Hal Williams is 87 years old and lives a humble life with an estimated net worth of $2 million. He may never have become a superstar, but fans still remember him as Willie Washington and Lester Jenkins, characters who felt like real neighbors, played by an actor who gave dignity to everyday men. Gossett Jr. as Uncle Wilbert. Uncle Wilbert Evans appeared only briefly in Good Times, but he carried the authority of family. Gossett Jr., 38 at the time in 1974, gave the role presence even in a single episode. To many fans, though, Gossett is remembered not for Wilbert, but for a towering career that broke barriers. He became the first black man to win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, thanks to his unforgettable performance as Gunnery Sergeant Emil Foley in An Officer and a Gentleman, 1982. He also earned an Emmy for Roots, where his portrayal of Fiddler became one of television's most searing depictions of slavery. His work inspired a generation of black actors who followed him. But the triumphs came alongside turmoil. In the 1980s, Gossett fell into heavy cocaine use, a destructive escape from the racism and pressures of Hollywood. Roles dried up, marriages collapsed, and the man who had once stood on the Oscar stage found himself battling legal troubles and health issues. Later in life, COPD and heart failure forced him into nursing care. Gossett Jr. died in 2024 at the age of 87. His net worth was estimated at $5 million, largely from his defining film and television roles. To fans, he was more than Uncle Wilbert. He was a trailblazer who carried both the glory and the scars of breaking Hollywood's racial barriers. The cast of Good Times gave us laughter, hope, and unforgettable memories, but their real lives were filled with struggles and surprises no script could capture. Which story shocked you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the untold truths behind television's most beloved stars.